Our journey begins at the Straits of Messina, before heading north up the coast to the resort town of Tropea. Continuing north past a striking coastline and hilltop villages, we come to Paestum, one of the greatest Greek archaeological sites of the ancient world. Further north, we take a dramatic dawn flight around the Amalfi coastline, the Bay of Naples and Mount Vesuvius, and then explore the ancient Roman town of Pompeii. On the north side of the bay, after a closer look at Vesuvius, we pass the crowded city and port of Naples. Flying west along the coast is the beautiful island of Ischia. Our journey ends at sunset on the other side of the bay over the island of Capri, and a look at a Roman emperor's summer villa. The Straits of Messina separate the southern tip of mainland Italy from the island of Sicily. Through this narrow gap is one of the busiest shipping lanes in the Mediterranean. And amongst the merchant vessels, an Italian warship exits the strait's 3-kilometre wide northern end. Across the bay is the white-grey granite peninsula of Cape Vaticano, and a favourite bathing place of local people. This is in the region of Calabria. And on the other side of the peninsula, perched on a cliff top by the sea, is one of the most popular holiday resorts along this stretch of coast, Tropea. The town has one of the best beaches in the area, and is one of the most fashionable holiday places in the region, attracting visitors from across northern Europe. The town is actually situated on an ancient reef jutting out into the Gulf of St. Euphemia, and is one of Calabria's prettiest towns, with its ancient houses and streets perched on the high cliff. But apart from being a popular resort, Tropea is also noted for growing the best red onions in Italy. And they are so famous that cipolla di Tropea, Tropea onions, has become the Italian synonym for all red onions. And somewhat bizarrely, a local ice cream manufacturer actually produces a red onion flavour. As we head north, we enter the Campania region of Italy, and a great deal of the coastline is now a national park as well as a UNESCO World Heritage Site. Palinuro Bay has some of the cleanest beaches, sea caves for divers, and nature trails offering breathtaking views of old small villages like Pisciotta. Legend has it that descendants of the Trojans escaping from Troy founded a colony here. Further into the national park is the hilltop town of Castelnuovo Cilento, which, like so many towns in Italy, has a history stretching back to the Roman era. From the castle, it is possible to see a wide plain to the north. And on it, a few miles from the sea, lies one of the best examples of a Greek city from ancient times, Paestum. It had been completely abandoned by the 9th century following the final collapse of the Roman Empire, aided by savage raids from Arabs and increasing outbreaks of malaria from being on a low-lying plain by the sea. Paestum was gradually swallowed up by thick subtropical forest and infested with malaria mosquitoes, which is why it was probably not rediscovered until the late 18th century, when road builders ploughed their way through the forest. Even then, it was largely ignored until the 20th century, due to the mosquitoes, snakes, and scorpions. Their city was originally called Posidonia, after Poseidon, the Greek god of the sea, and named Paestum by the Romans. It was founded back in the 6th century BC by Greek settlers, and taken over by the Romans around 300 years later. It was the Greeks who built the 3 large temples, and the Romans who added roads, more houses, a forum and a theatre. But it is these magnificent temples which are the glory of Paestum. The most complete is the one dedicated to Neptune, the Roman god of the sea, and dates from about 450 BC. Almost everything remains intact except the roof and parts of the inner walls. The main outer columns are fluted in the Doric style of classical architecture. In the centre are two more rows of columns. It's thought that the temple was also dedicated to Apollo, the god of light, truth, music and poetry, or possibly Zeus, the father of gods and men. But when it was originally built, it was dedicated to Hera, goddess of fertility and creativity. And a legend grew up that childless couples flocked to the temple at night to attempt procreation under the stars, in the belief that the goddess would ensure a pregnancy. This temple is one of the 3 most complete examples in the world. The oldest temple is close by, and in this case its dedication is certain, thanks to inscriptions to goddess Hera on some of the stones. An open-air altar was unearthed in front of the temple, where the faithful could witness rites and sacrifices without entering the inner chamber, which was for priests only. Paestum is off the beaten track, and is often fairly empty of visitors. But this remarkable survival of an ancient Greco-Romano city is well worth a visit for the opportunity it gives us to walk in the footsteps of the people who lived in these ancient civilizations. Paestum is now a UNESCO World Heritage Site. As we continue north up the coast, the clouds begin to gather over the mountains at the end of the day, and we just make the helipad in time before the weather closes in. At dawn, the Amalfi Coast is a truly magical sight, as the clouds are lit up in various shades of pink and red. And overlooking the bay is the brooding presence of the well-known volcano Vesuvius, which dominates the landscape. Even at this time of the day, the ferries are busy carrying commuters across the bay to Naples in these high-speed boats. As the sun begins to rise in the east, these passengers will have to wait until it climbs above the volcano. And as dawn progresses, the colours change to golden as we climb to see the sun above Vesuvius. The present volcano is fairly young, and probably only 17,000 years old. It was created after a much larger volcano collapsed several thousand decades earlier. Over the last few centuries, it has erupted around 50 times, the last one being in 1944. This left a crater with a rim of 1.6 kilometers and a 300-meter drop to the bottom. The most famous eruption was in 79 AD, and we will return to that dramatic event a little later on. Meanwhile, we head back towards the Amalfi coastline, where the mountains catch the early morning sun and clouds continue forming along the high cliffs. These clouds are known as orographic, and they occur when an air mass at low level is forced up over a rising terrain, like a coastline. As the air rises, it cools, and the relative humidity can become 100%, and at that point, clouds form, streaming back over the high ground. It is not surprising that this dramatic coastline is a very popular tourist destination, and in 1997 it was listed as a UNESCO World Heritage Site as a cultural landscape. It would also seem impossible that a road could be built along these high mountains, but the Romans didn't think so, and they carved most of this route out of the sides of the cliffs. The road has since been widened to accommodate 2 lanes and follows the coast for about 80 kilometers. For those with a fear of heights, then this is not for you. But for those that brave it, the views down to the Tyrrhenian Sea and up to the mountaintops are spectacular. It must count as one of the most dramatic bus routes in the world. Along this road are a number of popular resorts. One of them is Positano. Today this seaside town is a very popular place to visit, but its popularity only really started in the second half of the 20th century. In much earlier days it was a successful fishing port, but had by the mid-19th century fallen on hard times. The American writer John Steinbeck wrote articles about Positano in the 1950s, which helped begin the revival of the town's fortune. He wrote that Positano bites deep. It is a dream place that isn't quite real when you are there, and becomes beckoningly real after you have gone. As we fly along this dramatic coastline towards the town of Amalfi, it's worth recounting the legend of how the name came about. It involves Hercules, son of Zeus, who fell in love with a beautiful nymph. Their romance was a brief one as she died soon after it began. He searched the world to find the most beautiful place on earth to bury her, and legend says he found it here. Her name was Amalfi. In reality, the town was first mentioned in the 6th century, and since then has been occupied by several different empires, as it was an important trading port for centuries. The town is also famous for being one of the first centres of papermaking in Europe, and still makes handmade paper today. In the 1920s and 30s, Amalfi saw the arrival of tourists, and in particular rich British aristocrats, who put the town on the map. Since then, tourism has become the main economy. High above is the mountaintop town of Ravello. In the 19th century, it became a place for artists, writers and composers to stay in the summer. Richard Wagner wrote in a hotel guestbook, "The magical garden of Klingsor is found," suggesting the town was an inspiration for one of his operas, Parsifal. The Ravello Festival began in 1953 in honour of Richard Wagner, and is a 2-month-long season of music and arts, all set against this dramatic background. In the steep-sided valleys, lemon trees grow on terraces, which are used in one of the most famous products from the Amalfi region, limoncello. This lemon liqueur is made from the zest of Susato Amalfitano lemons, which are steeped in grain alcohol until the oil is released. It is one of the most popular liqueurs in Italy, and increasingly around the world. On the other side of the Amalfi Peninsula is a large flat plain, flanked by mountains to the south, the Bay of Naples to the west, and Vesuvius to the north. and it is in the middle of this plain that a complete Roman town was discovered in the 18th century, which had lain covered by ash and pumice since the volcanic eruption of 79 AD. Pompeii. However tragic the event, it was Vesuvius that preserved Pompeii for future generations, when the volcano unleashed its awesome power and effectively hid the town for around 1700 years. The loss of life was terrible, but it is now thought that most of the deaths were not caused by the ash cloud and suffocation, but by the wave of intense heat of at least 250 degrees centigrade, which swept across the city, causing instant death. It was towards the end of the 18th century that proper excavation began. And as the city slowly began to reveal itself, people realized they were able to walk through an almost complete Roman town, with paved streets, shops, houses and theatres. The original decoration was still on the walls, and this, along with household objects, had an enormous impact on 18th and early 19th century neoclassical styles across the Western world. On the outskirts of the town is the amphitheatre, which is believed to be the oldest surviving example of one built of stone, which also gives a clue to the importance of Pompeii in the Roman Empire. The next amphitheatre to be built of stone would be 100 years later in Rome itself, the Colosseum. The arena was originally called a spectacular and not an amphitheatre, which had not yet come into use. Today, this remarkable survival from the Roman world is a UNESCO World Heritage Site and one of the most popular tourist attractions in Italy, with roughly 2.5 million visitors a year. The volcanic eruption in 79 AD also caused the land to rise and created a new coastline. The ash and pumice covered a wide area, including what was then the seaside town of Herculaneum. This was actually discovered before Pompeii, with excavation beginning in 1738. But it was difficult to unearth due to the built-up area, and when Pompeii was discovered, which was easier to work on, Herculaneum took a back seat. This was a wealthier town than Pompeii, and when the houses began to be revealed, an enormous number of artifacts were found, and the Roman wall decoration in some of the houses was virtually intact. Up to that point in history, no one had any idea what it truly looked like. So, as with Pompeii, drawings were made of the walls and then published in book form. The style quickly spread across Western Europe. Herculaneum is often overlooked by visitors, with most of them going to the much larger Pompeii. But this site is less crowded and in many ways more manageable to walk around. So much more of this ancient town now lies under modern buildings, including the Forum. Perhaps they will remain hidden, never to be revealed again. What can't be overlooked by visitors is Vesuvius itself, and almost every day of the year, coaches and cars climb the northern slope, delivering thousands of people who want to experience a volcano up close. Just inside the much older crater ring of Monte Somma is a dried-up lava flow, which is a reminder to everyone visiting that Vesuvius is considered one of the most active volcanoes on Earth, and many experts believe it is not a question of if it erupts again, but when. The Italian government have plans to evacuate at least 600,000 people if Vesuvius starts to give warning signs of a major eruption. But until then, it remains a huge draw for visitors, and those people with stamina can walk up a steep path to the crater's edge. The city of Naples lies only a few miles away, and over the centuries, its inhabitants have learned to live with the possible danger they may one day face from their brooding neighbour. Naples is the third largest city in Italy after Rome and Milan, and is one of the oldest continuously inhabited cities in the world, going back to around 700 BC. Before the unification of Italy in 1861, the city was the capital of the Kingdom of Naples, and as a result, it has some fine historic buildings. One of them is the Castel dell'Ovo, which literally means egg castle. It was the Roman poet Virgil who had a reputation as a sorcerer and put an egg into the foundations to support the fortifications. In the 9th century, the Roman fort was demolished and then rebuilt by the Norman invaders in the 12th, and what we see today dates from the 15th century. Along the coast from Naples, Roman remains can be found, and overlooking the sea in a spectacular position is the Villa Posillipo, complete with its own theatre, which after 2,000 years is still used for open-air concerts during the summer months. Off the coast are a number of volcanic islands, including Procida. At its highest point is the town of Terra Murata, which is really more of a fortress. It was designed to protect its citizens from invasions by the Saracens during the 15th century. On the western side of Procida is part of a long extinct volcano, which is now a nature reserve. At the far end of the chain is the largest island in the Bay of Naples, Ischia. Today it is home to over 60,000 people, and the main industry is tourism, with around 6 million visitors a year. This mountainous island was formed by volcanic action over 50,000 years ago, with the last eruption in 1302. This has created thermal spas and volcanic mud for the largely German and British tourists who have been coming here since the 19th century. In fact, a large proportion of the Italian-speaking population here have also learnt German and English. Over the years, the island has attracted writers, composers and artists who have made Ischia their home. It has also attracted filmmakers, from Cleopatra in the 1960s to modern Hollywood films, such as the talented Mr. Ripley. Perhaps the most beautiful island in the Bay of Naples, especially at sunset, is on the south side, Capri. This magical island has been a resort since Roman times, and in Greek mythology it was known as the Isle of the Sirens. Like so many resorts in the area, it was the 19th century that saw the arrival of tourism, and Capri attracted the rich and famous, as it still does today, with many well-known figures owning villas on the island. High on a promontory on the eastern end of Capri is the Villa Jovis, which was built by the Emperor Tiberius around 30 BC. This was once a massive palace from where the emperor ruled the whole Roman Empire. He moved here from Rome as he feared assassination from his political rivals. It was said by later Roman historians that Tiberius engaged in wild debauchery here and even had a place on the cliff where disobedient slaves and unwanted guests were hurled from the top to die on the rocks below. Whatever the truth, Tiberius's palace in the setting sun is a truly spectacular place to end this journey.